All right, it's time to get started here on a Wednesday night. Back to our regular weekly Panther-Lair Show as we go live here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's the site you need to subscribe. That's our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's kind of just how it's spelled, or just how it sounds, Pantherlaircom. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Last week we had the post-game show, our first basketball post-game show, at least the first one that I can remember. I don't know if we did one in the past, but we did it last week after the Carolina game. That was a lot of fun. We certainly had a good time on last week's show, and things have not been quite so much fun since then for Pitt basketball. So we've obviously got a lot to talk about with your Pitt basketball Panthers. And then on the football side, Pitt spring football starts up next week, Monday. First day of spring football. They'll have 15 practices, including the spring game, which I believe is on April 9th. Starting pretty early this year, getting it going on the 28th. And then I think they have 1 week off for spring break in there, so they don't go full, they're not going constantly between the 28th and April 9th, but pretty steady through there. So we've obviously got a lot to talk about heading into spring football. But I want to start off before we jump into the basketball stuff, because I feel like we're going to go deep on basketball here tonight to get started. I have to tell you about Homefield, because I tell you about Homefield every week, but I got to tell you about something special they have going on right now, and it stinks because this is a special 2-day sale that they've got, and it's already started. Today was the first day. Wednesday the 23rd was the first day. Thursday the 24th is the second day of the sale. It's the Friends and Family sale. You need to go check it out right now. Homefield apparel.com. You go to that site, and across the top of the site, there's a black banner that says Friends and Family sale, 30% off select products. And this is just Wednesday and Thursday, the 23rd and the 24th. You get 30% off the select products. You click that banner, you go there, and you can pick the school. You can pick any of the schools that they have. And if you go to Pitt, there are 5 items you can choose from. They have limited quantities, but there are 5 items, including this sweet retro rock look. All right, you can get this in a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, 30% off. There's no code that you need. It's applied at the checkout. Homefieldapparel.com. Friends and Family sale, 2 days, and really 1 day is already done. So you have basically 1 day to do this. If you listen to this podcast or watch this video on Friday, you're too late. You missed it. This is why you need to watch live on Wednesday nights at 8:30 on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. 30% off. Okay? Limited time only, limited quantities. You get this sweet look. Homefield has great stuff. I've talked about it every week. Great logos and designs, great shirts, the material, the quality. It's top of the line, and you can get it for 30% off. So go to homefieldapparel.com, homefieldapparel.com. Click right at the top where it's the Friends and Family sale. You get 30% off all the sweet Pitt stuff, and then stuff from a bunch of other schools too. So they have a ton of stuff there at Homefield. You've got to check it out right now. Literally right now. You are on a short time scale. You're not going to be able to get this sale forever. It's going to end on Thursday the 24th. So go there. If you're watching this tonight on Wednesday, if you're going, or if you're listening to it or watching it on Thursday, you got to go check it out. Homefieldapparel.com. Because look, no matter what the Pitt sports programs do, you still are a fan of Pitt and you still want to look good. And what looks better than this retro rock, right? It's sweet. It's just a sweet logo. So go check that out. Homefieldapparel.com. In the last few days, and certainly, since Saturday with the Georgia Tech game, and then since last night with the Miami game, it knocked us all back. Yeah, I think a lot of us, I was willing to buy into improvement. This was the biggest thing as Pitt built that 3-game winning streak. They beat Florida State and NC State and North Carolina. One of the biggest things that stood out to me, and there were a few, one of the biggest things that stood out to me is that they were improving. They genuinely looked like they were getting better. They were playing better. They were playing better basketball, and they just looked better. And I thought, this is a team that's finally getting better. They're improving as the season goes on. It's been a long time since we've seen a Pitt team do that. And I think if you're a fan of any team, whether the team is playing well or the team is struggling, you like seeing them improve. There's nothing that feels better than watching your team play better at the end of the season than they did at the beginning. And particularly for a team that has struggled the way Pitt has, seeing them get better, seeing them improve. Okay, and one of the biggest things I talked about, and I wrote this in the 321 column on Friday on Panther-Lair.com. I think I talked about it on Wednesday night after the Carolina game. I talked about it on the Panthers Insider Show, on The Fan, on Saturday morning. I tried to talk about it everywhere I could because I genuinely believed that what we were seeing was a reflection of what the coaches believed Pitt would be this season. That they were finally developing and growing into the team that the coaches thought they would have all year long. Now, granted, they still didn't have Nike Sabandi, but they were, the coaches envisioned a roster that had Ethiel Horton all season, that had Jamarius Burton all season, that had Nike Sabandi all season. And they didn't get that. They didn't have that. And it caused them struggles throughout the month of December, in November and in December and even into January. And even once they got Ethiel Horton back, he wasn't fully back. But through that 3-game winning streak, it looked like he was fully back. It looked like he was coming into his own. You know what I mean? He was finally comfortable on the court. Jamarius Burton had settled into his role. Femi Odikale, you can see his picture there, settling into his role. Seemed to be really figuring out what he could do, how he fit in with this team, and how he could best help them win. And it seemed like that applied to everybody. Because everybody through that 3-game winning streak played pretty well. Odikale, Burton, Horton, Mo Gee, and John Hughley played really well. Will Collier and Noah Jeffers. I almost did it again. Noah Collier and Will Jeffers and Onibuchi Iziakudo coming off the bench played well. They fit their roles. They understood what they needed to do to get Pitt to win. And they understood that was the primary goal. And if they all played their roles, the team could win games. And that's what they did through that 3-game winning streak. And I bought into it. Not that they, I'm tired of saying turn the corner because nothing's ever that linear. It's not always steps forward that you turn the corner and you never look back. With teams of the talent level that Pitt has, there are always going to be moments where you do step back. But I thought they had made some real steps forward. That I thought that they were coming into their own and again, looking like the team they were expected to be. The team the coaches thought they were going to have this season. I thought that's where they were headed. And I thought that's where they were. And I saw an opportunity with Georgia Tech on Saturday to continue those strides. And continue improving and continue moving forward. And instead they fell flat on their face. In a game that ended up being, a 6-point loss, 68-62, I think. But it was a blowout. It was a blowout loss. Even if Pitt made it close in the final 2 minutes, it was a blowout loss. Just like beating Carolina the way they did was more or less a blowout win. But it was a blowout loss to Georgia Tech, despite the final score. And it was a major step back. And then on Tuesday night, they take on a Miami team that's pretty good. Pretty good Miami team. They have some really good guards. They're a tough matchup for a lot of teams. And they just beat the living hell out of Pitt. And as I'm watching that game on Tuesday night, the very beginning, and then Pitt rallies back a little bit. It's like 14-2, but Pitt battles back. They score a bunch of points. They make it competitive, and then they have nothing. They get run off the court in their own building, which is a moot distinction at this point because they could be playing at, friggin' Trees Hall or the Fitzgerald Fieldhouse or someplace. It doesn't matter. There is no home court advantage right now for Pitt. And that's of their own making and of their own doing. But I'm watching it and I'm thinking, this team isn't any better than they were at the beginning of the season. And they have Ethiel Horton settled into a role. And they have Jamarius Burton settled into a role. And all these guys who developed and improved and seemed to be really taking steps forward in that 3-game winning streak. And they weren't any better than they weren't any better than the team that lost to the Citadel. And at least when they lost to the Citadel, or they lost those other early season games, you could say, well, they don't have Ethiel Horton, and they don't have Nike Sabandi, and they don't have Jamarius Burton yet. And when Burton comes back, it's going to take them a little while. There were at least excuses in November and December. No excuses now. There's no excuses for that. And it's not just that they lost, it's that they got blown out. 2 games in a row. One against a team that was supposed to be the worst team in the conference. And the other against one of the better teams in the conference. A team whose record was similar to that of North Carolina, who Pitt just blew out down there. And when you look at the difference between, say, the Carolina game and the Georgia Tech game, or the Carolina game and the Miami game, you know what it really was? They just made shots against Carolina. They made shots. And didn't turn it over as much as they did against Georgia Tech and Miami. I don't think there was any significant difference in the preparation. I don't think they really looked like, when I watched Miami and Georgia Tech, when I watched those 2 games, I didn't think Pitt had any idea what Georgia Tech was doing on offense. I don't think Pitt had any idea what Miami was doing on offense. And Pitt, and they just couldn't do anything to protect the ball. And they just kept giving it up and exerting no effort whatsoever in getting back to prevent fast breaks off the turnovers. Miami had 19 points off turnovers in the first half. In the first half. In game 28 of the season, 29 of the season. It was an embarrassing performance. And, I think it was... There's no nails in the coffin. I mean, I don't think in this particular coffin, I don't think there are nails. But boy, was that bad. That was one of the worst losses I think we've seen, at least in an ACC game. If you want to talk about things like San Francisco of PA, or you want to talk about the Citadel or this or that. Yeah. There have been some bad losses under Jeff Capel. Bad losses under Kevin Stallings. The man lost to Duquesne, for Pete's sake. But in terms of games where they looked like they had no idea what the opponent was doing, where they looked ill-prepared, where they looked poorly coached, where they had poor effort, poor execution, poor energy, poor desire to win, and just a fundamental lack of the understandings of things that they need to do if they want to win games, I can't think of many that were much worse than what we saw last night, on Tuesday night. There are very specific, very precise, very intentional things this basketball team has to do in order to win games. And if I didn't know any better, I'd say they were flat out refusing to do them on Tuesday night. This team is designed in a very specific way. And they're designed to win in a very specific way. And maybe they got too caught up in the idea of making shots like they did at North Carolina. But that's not their game. 56-51 against Florida State, that's their game. That's who they are. And that's who they're built to be. And maybe they just got too enamored with all the fireworks at North Carolina. And thinking that they're this great shooting team when they're not. This great scoring team when they're not. And this great offensive team when they're not. And that's okay. You don't have to be a great offensive team. I don't say that, and they're not, as a way to disparage them. They just need to recognize who they are. And when they've recognized who they are, when they've played to their strengths and tried to do the things that they need to do for this team to win, they've won games and they've gotten very close to winning games. And when they've strayed from that, when they've thought they were someone that they were not, when they thought that they were a team that they were not, when they thought that they had a roster construction that they did not have, they lost, often in spectacular ways like they did on Tuesday. But it wasn't even just the sort of fundamental lack of understanding about who they are and what they need to do to win games. They didn't look like they had any idea what they were doing out there. Intentionally or otherwise, they looked lost on the court. And at both ends, they looked lost. And that's an indictment on the staff. Okay? I go back and forth about what I think about motivation. How do you get guys fired up? Should you get guys fired up? Should guys be able to motivate themselves? Should you need a coach to rev you up? I don't know about that. I go back and forth. I mean, damn, man, you're playing college basketball. You should be fired up every time you get on the court. A lack of energy and a lack of intensity should never be an indictment on you, and it should never be spoken of you, and that should never be a claim lobbied against you. But it has been far too often with this team. And I mean, I have to put some of that on the coaches, because ultimately they are responsible for what goes on the court. They're responsible for motivating the players, but a lot of that's on the players as well. But beyond just the motivational side, I thought they looked poorly prepared. I thought they looked like they didn't have any idea what they were doing out there. I thought they looked completely just almost surprised at what Georgia Tech did on offense. Even though after the game, they talked about it. You know, Mogi talked about it. Josh Pastner talked about it. Jeff Capel talked about it. There's no secrets about Georgia Tech's offense. And yet Pitt, what are they doing? I have no idea what they're doing. They look completely lost. And against Miami, it's a talented team. It's a really good team. But that doesn't mean you have to look like you are a D2 team against them. You know, I saw, you know, I don't understand it. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say I don't understand it. I do understand it. I mean, we've seen this before. And maybe it just strikes, you know, extra disappointing because of the success they had in the games leading up to it. And I don't know, like, you know, good radio, good podcasting would be to sort of start out with like that, you know what I mean? And really kind of break down the issues. And then you sort of segue into, here's what they need to do going forward. You know what they need to do going forward. There's no mysteries about what they need to do going forward. I don't need to sit here. I'm not going to, you know, there's nothing I'm going to say that you're going to be like, yeah, if they just do that. We all know what they need to do. They're not a great offensive team, so they need to defend like crazy. They're not a great offensive team, so they need to rebound like crazy. They're not a great offensive team, so they need to stop turning the ball over. And yet they continue to do these things. You know, they continue poorly defending poorly, you know, not rebounding very well, and committing turnovers. And see, 30 games in, if you haven't gotten the message yet, 30 games in, if you haven't found a way to get the message across yet, then you all failed. And they have. If you can't get the message across, you know, you're not going to win every game, but you can at least go out and try. You can at least go out with a lot of intensity and a lot of energy and at least be hard to play against and not just be a pushover like Pitt was for Georgia Tech and for Miami. Again, disregarding the final 2 minutes of the Georgia Tech game. You can, I mean, Jeff Capel says something about having pride. Yeah, I mean, you can have some self-respect and try to challenge your opponents. All right, I know there's a lot of comments about basketball jumping in here on the live stream, so I want to get started with this. RJCman38 starts off as a super chatter. Remember, you can be a super chatter. You click that little $sign down there, throw a couple bucks to the podcast. We appreciate that. We appreciate your support for sure, and it's definitely a good way to make sure your comment and question gets read. And RJCman38 says, Jeff Capel must be removed from his duties as men's basketball head coach. I'll say it right off the bat, okay? It's just not happening. It's just not happening. Anthony Tennyson followed up with a comment. Good evening, Chris. A lot to talk about for the people that want Capel gone. Unless they have $15 million to donate, need to just table that for now. Yeah, I don't know what the amount is. I don't know what Jeff Capel's buyout is right now, but I'm fairly confident it's more than Pitt is willing to spend. Okay? And you could talk about the basketball program or losing money in the seats and all this stuff. It's more than Pitt is willing to spend to make someone go away. Yeah, because you're not just paying him to go away. You're not just paying him more than his salary to make him go away. You also then have to pay the salary of a new coach to come in. And who are you getting who's worth anything that you're going to be able to afford to pay them a competitive salary and pay Jeff Capel, 5 times his salary to go away? He's got 5 years left on his deal after this. 5 years left on his contract after this season. Okay? That's not a cheap buyout. Okay? That's expensive to pay somebody to go away when they have 5 years left. All right, that's how these buyouts are made. You fire somebody early in a contract, and sort of relatively speaking, this is early in a contract, because remember, there was a contract extension on January 8th, 2020, after Jeff Capel had coached 47 games at Pitt, a year and a half or so into his time at Pitt. And he got a contract extension, a 2-year extension, on top of the 7-year deal he signed when he got to Pitt. Came in, signed a 7-year deal, and got a 2-year contract extension less than 2 years into his time. Okay, so he goes through 2026-27. That's what his current contract is. That means 5 seasons after this. And the way these buyouts work, you fire a guy with 5 years left on his contract, you're going to owe him a lot of money. Pitt doesn't have that money. And if they do, they're not spending it to make a coach go away. And you can yell and hoot and holler and say all the things you want or may want to say about it, but guess what? That's just the reality of it. They're not paying him that kind of money to go away. And to be honest, you're not going to like this. They shouldn't pay that money to make him go away. They should not go into debt to fire a coach. Okay? If you want to do something money-wise, if you want to commit money to the program, you go to Jeff Capel after this season and say, Jeff, what can we do to support you and help you succeed? What are the things you need to get this program turned around? If you're Heather Lyke, if you're the Pitt Athletics Administration, you need to sit back and say, okay, we gave this guy an extension. We have 5 years. He has 5 years left on his contract. That's going to be a lot to buy out. So instead of spending the millions and millions and millions it's going to cost to get him to go away, let's figure out a smaller amount we can give him now to help him try to turn this program around. And if that's a budget for assistant coaches, if that's a budget for recruiting, if it's facility, whatever, not whatever it is, you don't just give him a blank check, but let's say, what can we do to help him here? Jeff, is there something you feel like you haven't gotten that you need? And every coach always needs something, always wants something. Maybe you find something that way. You don't go into debt. You don't borrow to pay someone to go away like this. I don't think it's good business practice. I don't think they're in a position to do that, and I don't think they should be in a position to do that. I think Heather Lyke, look, they're trying to do a very big Olympic sports project. Right? In the Victory Heights project, I can't imagine she wants to divert millions away from that to pay a coach to go away. No matter how any of us feels about the basketball program, I can't imagine that she's too inclined to divert funds like that. Michael B is the super chatter as always, and we appreciate it. He says, Chris, I've had it with Capel enough. He can't be brought back for another season. His team quit yesterday. We could all see it. Hughley all but admitted the players aren't listening to him. He sucks as a coach. See, the hard thing is, look, I appreciate your sentiment, okay? Maybe they did quit yesterday. Maybe they didn't play with the energy that they needed to play with. But the thing is, something worked right, in the 3 games prior to the Georgia Tech game. Maybe, you hold out some small sliver of hope that whatever was shown in that game, shown in those 3 games, is something that can be built on. That, it can somehow get through to the players that when it clicks, it can actually work. But, like I say, I think if you're Pitt, you have to look for ways, you have to look for something to build on. Because I just think it costs way too much to get anything, I think it costs way too much to make any kind of move. Let's see here. Anthony Tennyson says, like I see it on Twitter, if the core players come back, and I think they will, that's Jamarius Burton, Femi Odikali, Will Jeffers, Ethiel Horton, Nike Sabandian, John Hughley, and Jeff Capel adds a stretch 4 and a true point guard, they won't be that far off. So, we've talked about what next season could be. We've talked about what the core is and what it could be built on. you know, so it's tricky. I mean, the guys you mentioned, I think obviously number one most important guy to come back next year is John Hughley. You've got to get him back. I would think that Jamarius Burton and Nike Sabandy, I mean, those are guys using their super senior years next year. I would think you're going to have them back. So you need to get Hughley back, number one. That's the most important. You get him back with Burton and Sabandy. Ideally you get Ethiel Horton back. You'd like to hold on to Femi Odekali as well to get another guard in there. I'm with you on Will Jeffers. I'd like to see him around for another year. I think he's so young. He's got so much potential to improve and develop and grow. You'd like to see him do it here and watch that growth. Kind of like you said, though, Tony, adding a stretch four and a point guard, those are probably the keys. I've been one who says that I don't know if they really use a true point guard. It does, and maybe it's just a matter of the fact that they don't have one, but they don't really use a true point guard. I guess Capel did in the past with Xavier Johnson, I suppose. But I think a four is definitely the priority. I think you've got to find a power forward in the transfer portal. You need an older guy who can come in and play right away. And then that's your core. That's who you build around. And Tony says, with all those guys, they won't be that far off. And I somewhat agree, Tony, but my issue right now is, you look at the roster they've put out here, and on Saturday and Tuesday, they weren't any better than they were at the beginning of the year. They weren't any better than they were last year, the year before. And it's concerning because there are times where where it just doesn't look like it's going to work. And it's concerning. Let's see here. Joe New is a super chatter. He says, how about forcing Jeff Capel to fire his brother? So I've said this before. People on the message boards know this. They've heard me say it. I say it often about, the question of whether, should an athletic director tell the head coach to fire the offensive coordinator or this or that. I don't think it's ever a good approach for the athletic director to demand staff changes, particularly specific ones like that. You got to fire this guy. You got to fire that guy. I don't think it's good leadership, to be honest. I don't think it's a good approach to the hierarchy of athletic departments and athletic, programs, because, to a large extent, almost like, in total, the athletic director hires the head coach to operate the program. You know what I mean? To do the things necessary to put the program in position to win. And ultimately, the head coach is going to be held responsible or accountable for the wins and the losses. And it's incumbent upon the head coach in any sport to make the necessary moves or adjustments to help the team win. And if that means changing the staff, then the head coach has to change the staff. If that means adjusting recruiting or bringing in different players, this or that, the head coach has to do those things. I think if you're an athletic director, you don't necessarily want to start in demanding staff changes, because you do that. Look, I think you want to give the coach the latitude to operate the program as he or she sees fit. And if it doesn't work, then you fire them because the results don't follow. If you say, you got to fire this guy, you got to fire that guy, you force these staff changes. And so the coach goes out, fires these people, brings in new people, and they don't win. The coach can come back and say, we would have been fine with my guys. You are the one who made us change staff members. And that's why we lost, because we lost our chemistry or continuity. These weren't the kind of coaches I wanted on my staff, et cetera, et cetera. I think you have to let the head coach make those decisions. And then if they make the wrong ones or the results aren't what they should be, then you let them go, because they're held accountable by the wins and losses. You don't force the staff changes. You let the head coach make those moves, knowing what's at stake, which is his job or her job. And so that's kind of my thought on that. And I think it creates a difficult relationship, a difficult working relationship, if you start forcing staff changes or forcing firings or hirings or things like that. I just think it's a recipe for trouble when you're already in a difficult situation. I think as the athletic director, you want to make sure that you've given the head coach all the support he or she thinks he or she needs. Okay? You've given as much support as possible so that the head coach can never turn around and say, well, I didn't have what I needed. So that the head coach has every opportunity to win kind of on his or her own merits. Josh Newark says, can a program survive depending essentially 100% on the transfer portal? So this is interesting, Josh. I mean, times have changed. Short answer, no. Short answer, no. Short answer, or medium length answer, you're going to need to recruit high school kids and develop them over time and bring them up and build a program and build a foundation that way. Long answer, you can build a lot with transfers. And in some ways, in a few ways, a number of ways, there are advantages to transfers over the high school kids. For one, you bring in a transfer, no matter what age they are, whether they're, they just finished their first year in college or their fourth year in college, they're older than the guys you're going to get out of high school. They have more experience playing at the college level than the guys you're going to get out of high school. So that's an advantage. That's number one. That's a positive. There's also an interesting sort of way of looking at it. We talked about this on the message boards a week or two ago. There's also an interesting way of looking at it where transfers, in a certain view, provide more stability or opportunity for stability than high school recruits. And that seems to be counterintuitive. That goes against everything we've always thought. But the reality is, transfers who come in, all right, you bring in a guy as a transfer. You bring in Ethiel Horton. Think of another good example. Nike Sabandi, I guess, would be another good example. Jamarius Burton, but he's going to be a super senior. But you bring in a transfer, okay? And the NCAA says, transfers, you can go somewhere. You can make one free transfer. You can play right away. You don't have to sit out. But kind of the flip side, and I don't know if it was ever specifically sort of spelled out like this in any formal way, but the flip side, and I think it was understood among compliance people, was that the NCAA was going to look at it and say, okay, we're giving these free transfers, but if you transfer again, or if you're in a situation where you need to get a waiver for immediate eligibility, it's going to be a lot tougher. We're going to be far less inclined to approve those waivers or grant those waivers. And that's almost sort of a trade-off, or an unspoken trade-off, a tacit trade-off of this immediate eligibility on your first transfer, this free one-time transfer or one-time free transfer. So what you have is, if you bring a guy in, say you bring in a guy as a freshman or sophomore transfer, you've got him for 2 or 3 or 4 more years, whatever it is, and you're probably going to keep him for that whole span. You're probably, if you bring in a transfer, with the way kids are moving these days, you probably have a better chance of developing a young transfer over the course of 2 or 3 years than you do of developing a high school player over the course of 2 or 3 years. Because high school guy, Kareem Koulibaly is a great example, right? So he transferred to St. Bonaventure. He's averaging like 9 minutes a game. All right? 9 minutes a game. If you brought in a freshman and he's averaging 9 minutes a game, a lot of guys who come in those situations and they're averaging that kind of low playing time, guess what they're going to do? They're gone. Kareem Koulibaly is not going to leave St. Bonaventure because he can't go anywhere and play right away without a really good reason for doing so to get a waiver. It's highly unlikely that would happen. And so the St. Bonaventure coaches are going to have him around for a couple years. Whereas a freshman who might come in and be averaging 9 minutes a game and not start and, just work off the bench in a very limited capacity, there's a decent chance that guy's going to leave. And so you actually have a better chance. And again, I know this feels sort of counterintuitive, and it's very much of the moment. This is how things are right now in 2022. They might be different in 2023 or 24 or 25, although I don't know that it's going to change all that quickly or all that soon. But you have a better chance of keeping a transfer in your program for 3 years than you do of keeping a high school kid. And even as I speak the words, it sounds like hyperbole. But it's not. I think that really is sort of the reality of the situation right now with how the transfer market has worked. And so, to Josh's question, can a program survive depending essentially 100% on the transfer portal? Short answer, no, but long answer, you can build a lot of your roster through the portal. You really can. And as the transfer as we move through the next few years, you could see even more of it. We had these kind of discussions on the football side about quarterback recruiting, about how, at least for the last couple recruiting cycles, Pitt hasn't really needed to push hard for a quarterback prospect, a high school quarterback recruit. Even though, I mean, they got Nate Yarnell in the 21 cycle, they haven't really had to push for guys. They didn't take anybody in 22. They didn't take any high school guys in 2020. You know, they took Davis Bevel in 19 and Nick Patty in 18 and Kenny Pickett in 17, Thomas McVitie in 16, right? But 20 and 22, 20 and 22, they didn't take a quarterback, and it was kind of okay because in 2020 they brought in, you know, Nate or Joe Yellen as a transfer. You know, 22, they've got so many guys on their roster, it's almost, you know, what's the point of bringing another high school kid in? Just guys are going to transfer. And the transfer portal exists with so many quarterbacks in it that you don't need to press and take a quarterback you're not sold on from the high school ranks when there are going to be so many guys available each year in the transfer portal. And I think we have to accept that, and coaches have accepted that recruiting is different now. And transfers are very much a part of how you're going to build your roster. And you have to embrace it. If you don't embrace it, you're going to miss out, because it's valuable, and I think there are certain areas where there's even more upside to transfers than there is to high school guys. Let's see here. Michael B, another super chat contribution. We appreciate that. It says, please explain why Milan Brown was promoted, because I have no clue what this man did to earn one. I don't know about stuff behind the I don't know behind the scenes. I don't know what the responsibilities and duties are there. I think Jeff Capel obviously thinks very highly of Milan Brown and gives him and probably gives him some real responsibilities and duties. But I don't know how things are, I don't know how the responsibilities are divvied up there. So, I mean, I can't tell you what Milan Brown did to get the transfer. I mean, I think he's a smart coach. I think he's a good coach. I think he's got a lot of experience. And, you know, like I say, obviously Jeff Capel trusts him. So I kind of think, that probably comes down to something like that. Let's see here. Trying to scroll through. You know, I think a lot of people are just sort of in the live chat reiterating a lot of what we're saying, about where the Pitt basketball program is right now. And, just kind of the state of things. I don't think Jeff Capel's getting fired this offseason. I'm almost positive he's not. I don't think he'll really... I don't think he's going to leave to go anywhere. I would be surprised if he's not the coach next season. So you can... I guess you have a choice, right? I mean, you can keep beating your head against the wall saying that he needs to go. Or you can say, well, let's see what he can build. If he has one more year, or if he has more, let's wonder what he can build. You can... I think you can sit around and talk about how the program is a mess and Jeff Capel needs to be fired, or you can, talk about what pieces they might have to build with. All right, Colton Janoski comes in as a super chatter, and we appreciate that. Wanted to Colton's got a question about football, and so I thought we could talk about that a little bit since spring football is next week. And I think it'd be good to switch off hoops just for a little bit, because, we're just all saying the same things over and over again, right? So Colton asks, does football roster have to be at 85-man limit for spring ball? If so, there will be at least 4 players leaving. So good questions there, Colton, and I think that's a good place to jump into the conversation about Pitt football as they head into spring camp next week. The thing with the 85-man scholarship limit, okay, this is what you have to understand. This is the way I've always understood it. There's an 85-man scholarship limit. And what that means is that at no point can they have more than 85 players on scholarship. You can never have more than 85 players on scholarship at one point. So there's not really a date. People have asked sometimes, what's the deadline where they have to, they have to get down to 85? Well, they don't have to get down to 85. They just have to never be above 85. So how that works in the spring, because Colton's saying they need at least 4 players leaving, I think what he's referencing is the number that they're projected to have in the fall. Because remember, there's still 6 freshmen or 5 freshmen who have not come to campus yet. They had 7 guys come in and enroll early out of a 12-man class, so there's still 5 freshmen who have not come to campus yet. So what you have is, right now, we're projecting Pitt for 87 scholarship players in the fall. That's if everybody comes back, everybody who's not said they're leaving comes back, and all the freshmen make it and all that stuff. It's 87. So they'd be 2 over. So they got to trim 2 off of that number. But they don't have to worry about that right now because, assuming nobody has left the team that we don't know about or been taken off scholarship or something, they right now, on this very moment, Wednesday, February 23rd at 9:14 p.m., they have 82 players on scholarship. Because the total number projected for the fall is 87, but that includes the 5 freshmen who aren't here yet. They're not on scholarship yet. They're not taking classes. So right now they have 82 scholarship players. Now that's notable in and of itself, Colton, because you look at Pitt's roster for spring camp, 82 scholarship players is a huge number. I can't remember ever seeing Pitt sit with 82 scholarship guys in spring camp. It's a ridiculously large number. It's a huge number. I mean, you could go 2 deep at every position and potentially even 3 deep at some spots. It's a giant number to have available, and it's a tremendous amount of depth. I think they could go 3 deep almost everywhere other than the offensive line, which is crazy. You never have that kind of depth of scholarship players. You never have that kind of depth in spring camp. And so that's a big storyline, I think, for this team, because you've got that depth. You can rotate. You can get a lot of reps for a lot of guys. You can get a lot of guys some valuable experience, and you can get a good look at a lot of guys. And maybe you'll have some of the younger players, some of the younger defensive linemen, I'm thinking, or maybe some of the younger defensive backs. They're all going to get a lot of work that they might not all get, when you get to fall camp in August. Because at that point, you need to start really honing in on the 2 deep. You need to start narrowing down who gets the reps so you can get the most reps and the most work for the guys you're going to be counting on during the season. But in the spring, you don't really have that pressure, and with so many guys, you're going to be able to get a really good look. And maybe a few guys will emerge and they'll surprise you, and you kind of like, oh, this guy can actually come out and play for us. Because you've got that level of depth. And so that's a huge storyline, I think, for this spring, is just the size of the roster and the amount of guys that they're going to have that they can use. It's going to be packed out there. It's going to be a giant roster. Now, a big part of that comes from 10 new players joining the roster this offseason. That's another big storyline. Like I said, 7 freshmen are coming in, plus the 3 transfers, and I think there's going to be more focus on the transfers, certainly than the freshmen. I mean, I think the freshmen are interesting, and we'll see if those guys can make some plays. I wouldn't be surprised to see like a guy like Addison Copeland make a big play in the spring game. Or maybe a Marquand Pope or Rylan Gandy, someone like that. But the transfers are really where the focus is. Kanate, Homefield, the wide receiver, Shane Simon, the linebacker. Those guys are going to play a lot this season. You're going to get a really good look at them in the spring game for sure. As long as they stay healthy and everything. And then, last but not least, Kedon Slovis is just, I mean, you talk about spring storylines, you talk about season storylines. I mean, Kedon Slovis is the number 1 storyline. And he's going to have competition. Nick Patty, I think, is going to be ready to play, in spring camp, even though he had that shoulder injury in the Peach Bowl. Davis Bevel obviously is going to be out there, and Nate Yarnell and Joey Yellen. But all the focus is going to be on Keaton Slovis. He's going to be expected to win the starting job and take over for Kenny Pickett and carry things forward. All these guys they have back on offense, it's all going to come down to Slovis and whether or not Slovis can take over and, lead this offense. Probably the biggest storyline for the season. I started writing some spring camp storylines, and obviously Keaton Slovis is going to be one of them. But, that's going to apply to the whole season of what he can do stepping into that starting quarterback job. And then sort of tied in with that, of course, is Frank Cignetti coming in, the new offensive coordinator, quarterback's coach as well. But, really his impact on the offense. I mean, it's those two guys. It's Slovis and Cignetti are going to be the ones who are going to be, they're going to have the most direct impact on this team's success. And whether they can carry over, their chances of repeating as Coastal champions, their chances of repeating as ACC champions, their chances of, doing whatever they're going to do in the 2022 season, it's all going to come back to Frank Cignetti and Keaton Slovis. And if those two guys are up to the task, I think the potential for this team is really, really high. They can achieve a lot of things and have a lot of success. And if those guys are not up to it, if Cignetti doesn't have his touch, if Keaton Slovis is not as good as Pitt needs him to be, then this season could be a disappointment. But it's really going to come back to those two. I think you look at all the other pieces in place on this offense, from the offensive line all coming back to Jordan Addison, to the other receiving targets, both the receiver and tight end, and then the running backs. You don't really have many holes in this offense. Tight end depth, I guess, and quarterback. Quarterback is the big giant hole on this offense, and if Keaton Slovis can fill it, if Frank Cignetti can call the plays, they can go out and win a bunch. The defense, obviously, you got to replace a bunch of linebackers, and that's a concern. You have quite a few inexperienced guys who are going to step into those roles. But I look at this team, and this will be a famous last word situation, but I look at this team, I look at what they're returning, I look at, kind of what I think they can be, what I think they need to be, what they probably do need to be in order to win. And I think it just comes back to offense. Look at how many games they won last year with offense. Offense got them pretty much everything they had. It's funny, though, I was thinking about it, that it's still such perfect poetry that this team built on offense, this team who experienced so much of its success through offense all season long, gets to Charlotte, and that game is, the ACC championship game is won by defense. The defense won that game. Yeah, no disrespect to Kenny Pickett's slide play, but the defense won that game. And it was sort of a perfect fitting ending to the season and a great way to win a championship, to have the other side of the side that wasn't getting talked about nearly as much all season, to have those guys step up and make all the plays to win it, to win a championship, win a real live honest to God championship for Pitt. So, I thought that was kind of perfect how it worked out, but it was still offense that got them to that point. And I think this year it's going to need to be offense that gets them to that point again, which means Keaton Slovis is going to have to be the man. And so he'll be a main focal point, throughout spring camp and throughout the summer and throughout August camp and throughout the season. It's going to be about him. And then what he does with all the weapons around him. Of course, as spring goes on, we'll talk about all the different, the position battles. And certainly I think we'll probably do more of that next week. Pitt basketball off this weekend. Kind of, I'm not going to say mercifully, but a little bit. It's definitely going to, it'll be good to have a little break from Pitt hoops before they come back on Tuesday night and host Duke in, Coach K's final road ACC game. I mean, that's going to be a pretty remarkable night. We'll see how Pitt's able to do. I don't really like their chances against Duke, but who the hell can tell with this team? I mean, seriously, who can really predict what this Pitt basketball team is going to do? I mean, it's impossible. It's impossible to predict. And unfortunately, the safest prediction is that they will not play at the highest level or play with the necessary intensity and energy. So, all right, last one. Josh Newark asks, need a fun question. I tried to ask this a few weeks ago at the end of the show. Who is the better Pitt student superfan? Pitt Pope, Deerhead, Stormtrooper dudes, or someone else? I don't know who Deerhead is. I think I've seen the Stormtrooper dudes. Are the Stormtrooper dudes, are they the guys who played like trumpet? Were there guys in the band who had Stormtrooper helmets? Like blue and gold Stormtrooper helmets? There was a weird panda mask for a while. There was a kid who dressed up like a slice of bacon. I remember that. I don't know if I thought that was the best, but I just remember it. There was a kid who used to stand. I feel like he would stand. You know where Pitt's bench used to be? That end of the court. It was the opposite end of the court from the media. And it was down in that section. And he had this blue shirt that was like tattered. And I feel like it said something about like Catholics have more fun or something like that. This was a while ago. This is like 10, 15 years ago. Yeah, it was like some like corny shirt like that, but it was all like tattered. It was pretty quality. But I don't know if he was the best fan. You know, there was JD and Mike Tam and all those guys. Before that, Dave, I never remember Dave's last name. He had a bald head, though. There's some good fans along the... You know, I could say this, like, where the media used to sit at the Peterson Event Center, we could really see the fans. Can't really see them from where we are now. So I don't really know... I don't have a good feel for individuals in the crowd anymore. But could kind of see... you know, we used to be able to really have a good view of the Pitt fans and the Oakland Zoo, and you know, it was a lot more fun back then. But we don't have a really good view on it now. So maybe some of those old heads who I just mentioned are listening to this podcast, and they can be like, "Hey, that was me you were talking about." Josh Newark says Deerhead was literally a deer head on a stick, dressed in a Hawaii shirt. Dude would walk into the stadium at halftime and just leave out the end zone. Yeah, that you might be before my time, Josh. He says that happened at Pitt Stadium. I didn't really spend as much time at Pitt Stadium as a lot of other people, so I don't know if that might be before my time. But anyway, I appreciate it, Josh. Thanks for the trip down memory lane. Listen, don't forget this. Speaking of memories, don't forget this. Homefield. Homefieldapparel.com. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Homefield Apparel. It's just what it sounds like. All one word. Homefieldapparel.com. You go to their front page. Right across the top, there's a black banner. I'm looking at it right now. Friends and family sale. 30% off select products. Click on that. You scroll over on the left side. It lists all the schools they have. Click on Pitt. Check out their sweet Pitt designs. They got 5 here that are for sale. 30% off. But it's only today, Wednesday, and tomorrow, Thursday. So February 23rd and 24th are the only 2 days for this sale. 30% off these sweet 5 shirts that they have. 3 t-shirts and 2 sweatshirts they have on the sale, including the Vintage Rock. So you can get a shirt like I have. We can be shirt buddies, and you can get it for 30% off right now. Just today and tomorrow, 23rd and 24th, homefieldapparel.com. Make sure you go there. All right, when you're not shopping for shirts at Homefield, make sure you're on Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting. You can also check out the message boards. I just signed a new contract there, so I'm going to be there for a few more years. Hopefully, when I have 5 years left, nobody's calling for my head like they are for Jeff Capel, but, you know, we won't get into the details of the buyout there either. But no, the message boards at Panther-Lair.com is definitely the place you want to check out and go hang out to talk to other Pitt fans. If you're a big fan of Pitt sports, you want to talk to other Pitt fans, Panther-Lair.com. All right, with Pitt having a game next Tuesday night, we'll be back here for the Panther-Lair Show on Wednesday night. We'll have a lot of Pitt spring practice talk. We'll talk about Pitt hoops, heading toward the regular season finale at Notre Dame next Saturday. Not this Saturday, next Saturday. So we've got a lot to talk about on that front. And, anything else that comes up. So Saturday morning, every Saturday morning, 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan, we have the Panthers Insider Show. So lots of Pitt sports talk for you. Wednesday nights at 8:30 here on the Panther-Lair Show. Saturday mornings on the Fan, Panthers Insider Show. So thanks everybody who tuned in tonight. Thanks all the super chatters and everybody else who posted in the live stream. We appreciate you. And we'll be back again next Wednesday night for another Panther-Lair Show. So thanks again for hanging out. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll talk to you again next week.